Welcome to the Cherish and Conquer podcast, the show dedicated to celebrating female entrepreneurs' strength, resilience, and innovation. Be inspired by stories of women and what they cherish to help them conquer against all odds. Every other week, you will learn from remarkable women on how they navigate challenges, uphold their values, and create sustainable success. And now, here's your host, Jim Rimbach.
Welcome to the Cherish and Conquer podcast. We're going to get ready to have a great discussion. I will try not to get into a laughing fit because Cynthia has already kind of started me on that path, and so I'm going to attempt to do so. So Cynthia Kay is actually the author of Small Business, Big Success, and we're going to talk a little bit about how you actually get there, right? So Cynthia,
Absolutely.
yeah. So Cynthia, welcome.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here.
So before we get into, our discussion and learn a little bit more about your journey, personal journey as well, can you tell us a little bit about how you're making a difference in people's lives?
Oh, that's a really hard question because, I think we all kind of do things and we're, I'm not always thinking about like, how am I impacting them? I'm just kind of doing what I do. But, I think in a lot of different ways, sometimes little ways, being there for people to, I'm kind of the go-to person for a lot of people. I'm the one they call when they're having an existential crisis. I talked to someone this morning who was having one of those. But I think one of the things that I try to do is I try to look around in my world and see what are ways that I can help. I own a media production company. And so one of the things that I do and my team does is that we really take on projects where people need our help. So for example, an organization that helps children that are food insecure, and they can't afford to do a big video production to let their donors know or to reach out and create awareness. And so we give away a lot of media production and we try to find those organizations that need help. A lot of times they find us. We don't have to look very far. But it's kind of part of our DNA that we believe in giving back. So that's a real tangible way that I think I help. I also spend a lot of time advocating for small businesses. I volunteer with a number of organizations where I mentor women business owners. I've got someone I'm mentoring right now that just a dear soul who has a great mission. And so I'm helping her one-on-one with coaching sessions. I volunteer to do that. And I do that through a formal program, but I do that informally as well. Spend a lot of time talking to business owners. So I think those are just some of the ways that I try to help and actually speak out. I former board chair of the National Small Business Association. So a lot of times they need business owners to speak out about how certain regulations are going to impact their businesses. And I feel like with my background, I'm able to articulate what a lot of people can't, right? Because they feel it and they experience it, but might not be so good at saying it. So I think that's kind of one of the things that I do too. I take that responsibility really seriously.
Thank you for sharing that. That's awesome insight. So you mentioned something about the media company piece. So how are you actually changing the lives in your client, for your particular clients with that business?
Well, for one thing, I make their lives easy. I think that's pretty fun. I would say that's always a hard question because I always say you should ask them, how am I doing that? I think we become more frankly than just a supplier or a vendor. These are people that are part of our family. And I know that sounds kind of trite. People say that, but I think we really live it. We know a lot about our customers. We know about their families. We know the struggles they're having. We're here if they need to vent. We take stuff off their plate. and help them do things, even if it's not something we can do. A lot of times we'll get people who will call us, and it might not be something we do, but we work really hard to try and find them someone that can do that. So I think there's lots of ways. And what surprises me sometimes is that I think we're not aware of the impact we have until much later. Um, I had someone recently who I hadn't talked to in probably 10 years, and she left. She was the CEO of a business and left, and was trying to find her path. And I'll be honest with you, I don't even remember that I did this. And she said, I can't believe you helped me look at my resume and look at my LinkedIn profile and told me, you really should do some of these things. And you coached me. And honestly, I'd forgotten about it. So that's why when you ask, like, what impact do I have? I think sometimes I'm doing things and I don't even know that there's an impact there. I hope there is.
Well, I think what you just shared right there, is kind of the important part. Is that, you do it regardless of what the impact may be. And of course, we're talking about positive things, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Because it oftentimes is, mainly invisible.
Yeah.
And that shouldn't matter.
No, and it shouldn't. And you know what? Sometimes I think we instinctively do things because we think someone needs something. And you do it because you're aware that maybe someone is struggling or someone needs to share something, and you don't even know that a word that you say or a kindness that you do has an impact. And maybe that's the best way, right? Is to have it be surprised by it.
That's true.
Want more insights from female entrepreneurs? Get complimentary access to Marina's Army for additional tips, tools, and tactics from this episode. Just go to Mirina.ai and click Community for access. Now, let's get back to the conversation.
Okay, so what inspired you to start your own business, and how does it align with the concept of cherish and conquer?
Yeah. Well, so I will say when I started my business, there weren't a lot of women business owners. I've been in business 35 years. I think a lot has happened for women in the last 35 years. But sometimes when people say, like, who were your role models? What women inspired you? And I go, you know what? There weren't any. The people who helped me were business owners that were friends of my dad, right? And I think what inspired me to own my own business was that my father was in business with his two brothers, and I saw what they could do. And they owned a dry cleaning business, right? And my cousins actually still own the business. But, out of that little business, they helped so many people. And not just by employing them, but by helping their employees, buy homes and co-signing on loans and, doing all kinds of things that were outside the scope of the business. And I saw that there was great power in that when you have an organization, you can use that organization to go beyond just what the scope of the business is to impact the lives of the people that are around you. So my dad always said to me, honey, you can do anything you want. You go after it. And knowing that I came from a Greek background where that was at a time when, like my big fat Greek wedding, where the father says, I want you to get married and have babies, right? That's what he said. So the little old Greek, my dad said, I want you to go to college and get a job and be self-sufficient. And so I always knew that I would own my own business. It kind of happened at a time when I didn't think it was going to happen. I got fired from a job in television, and you're nobody till somebody fires you, I've been told. And so I had to decide, did I want my future to be always ruled by what somebody else was doing, or did I want to forge my own path? And, I decided I wanted to own the business. I wanted to run it. I wanted to create opportunities for people. And so I just kind of jumped in and did it.
You did have great role models. They happen to be dad and uncles, right?
Yes, absolutely. And my mom too. My mom would have loved to have worked. But it wasn't kind of done in those days, but she always was very encouraging. I think almost to the point where she wanted me to have the life that she couldn't have, right? She wanted me to be able to go out and make my own way. And so she was ahead of her time too. I think both my parents were ahead of their time. So that was always good. And actually, both my sister and my brother are business owners as well. My sister is now retired. My brother is an attorney. So they kind of gave us that the wings to be able to do whatever we wanted to do, right?
Most definitely. As you're saying that, it reminds me, my great grandmother, and I'm 56. Had her own business, but she had to have her own business because, and this was back in the 20s and the teens. She was a divorcee with 2 kids.
Wow.
And so she ended up opening up a corner store, was very near the railroad up in the Chicago area, and her business was actually started by actually having breakfast ready and coffee ready and actually serving lunches to all the railroad workers.
Yeah.
Incredible.
That's amazing. Now that's a trailblazer. That was at a time when who would have known women would own businesses. And so to some degree, I get a little annoyed when people today, specifically women, will say, well, I don't have the opportunity. I go, really, you do. It's in you. It's not going to come from out there. It's you have to, and the climate and is so much better for really all people today to start businesses. This is probably the first time in decades when there is actually positive growth in small businesses. We were having net negative growth for years. And now people are going, and I think some of it was the pandemic. People decided they wanted to do something different than what they were doing. But there's huge opportunity out there if people put the right skills, if they have the skills to do it or go get educated to do it. And if they have a passion for what they do, I say passion goes a long way. They can't pay you enough money to do a job you don't love. But when you love something, wow, it's not like it's work. It's not work at all.
That's right. You have to cherish it in order to be able to conquer the challenges.
Absolutely.
Okay, so can you share a story when embracing feminine qualities or strengths helped you to overcome a challenge in your business?
Yeah. I have a lot of stories about that. I'm going to say that, and this is based actually on research. Daniel Amen's book, the Power of the Female Brain, Unleashing the Power of the Female Brain. I think women think differently. And we have, and this is, it's based on brain science, right? But I think I have a really good intuition and feel for people. And so for me, I think that I had the big challenge that I had was I had a male business partner. And for a while it worked really well. I was the majority owner. He was a minority owner, but there came a point at which we weren't going the same place. And I love teaching people. I want to teach someone what I know so that I can move on to do the next thing. And then they teach. I think that's a really important thing. He did not have that same attitude. He really wanted to hold the power and, power, he didn't want to teach someone how to do the video editing and I had to really use my my skills and my brain power and my empathy to explain why we needed to train other people. And I'll be honest with you, it worked for a while, and then it didn't work. And then I had to use, I think, my power of sitting down and having a heart to heart to say, we can't do this together anymore. And either you have to buy me out, or I have to buy you out, or we sell the whole thing. And I think being intuitive about that and using the sort of that female intuition helped me get through that. As it I ended up buying him out. I think that has been great for the business. The business has grown and thrived since then. And I love the fact that we now have men and women on my staff, and the women are doing jobs that are not always traditional. I mean, they're out carrying cameras around. Usually you think about men doing that. And so I think, that power of women to use our brains to think differently and to have empathy and to move people to action is really powerful if you can harness it.
For me, of course, I'm envious.
But you have skills I don't have, right? Men have different skills. Yeah.
Well, but the whole ability to think different is really crucial in today's rapid pace of change and constant innovation. Mm-hmm. Because if just the reality of business, if you're stuck doing the same thing that you were 3 years ago, you're behind. In some instances, the things that you were doing 3 months ago. It's
last week.
Yeah.
Last week.
And so, you have to be able to, make sure that you can, effectively evaluate, think, use, certain intuitions, but not rely on your gut completely, because you have to have data to support.
Absolutely.
But then also you need to take some educated risks, because if you're especially innovative and venturing into something new, sometimes there's just not data that exists in order to substantiate the decision. Yeah. So the iteration is key.
Yeah. And I think what sometimes happens is that people overthink things. To your point, you're never going to have, if you wait until you have all the information and all the data and all, you might never do anything. So what you have to do is you have to make a decision based on the best information that you have at the time, knowing that honestly, you can always go back and tweak things, in my world, people, sometimes my employees will come in and they'll go, oh, what are we going to do? And I go, is anyone sick? And they go, no. I go, did anyone die? And they go, no. I go, well, then I guess we'll figure it out, right? We'll figure it out. And we can do that. But I think, there are some very good reasons why women are heading up more and more corporations, although I have read that it's backsliding some. But I think that women have really great skills when they harness them.
Absolutely. Okay, so that brings up a really important question, because we hear it thrown around, quite a bit, and that's imposter syndrome. So how do you combat imposter syndrome, and what advice do you have for women who struggle with it in their business pursuits?
I'm going to say, first of all, I think both men and women have imposter syndrome. I don't think this is not a male-female thing. I really believe that. And so here's the thing. Confidence comes from ability, and ability comes from doing something over and over and over again. So what I often say to people is, sometimes you may not think that you have that ability, but the more you go out and you do it and you try it and you see, okay, this worked, this didn't work, being really self-reflective about it. I mean, there are things I do really well, and there are things I don't do very well. I still do those things that I don't do well. Why? Because I know if I can consistently do it, I'll get better. I think sometimes you have to just, you have to fake it until you make it. And I don't mean fake it in a bad way. I'm just saying you've got to use that power of self-talk. Often I will say to people, they'll get asked to go speak and they'll go, oh, I can't do that. And I go, really? They asked you to speak because you have knowledge. So you have to say to yourself, there's a reason they're asking me. And I do a lot of communications coaching and presentation training, and people are scared to death of it. And I go, you know what, though? They asked you because you're good at it. You have the expertise. Maybe you don't have that skill yet to be able to get up and, feel really comfortable. But just talking to yourself and saying, they asked for a reason. Here's what I do really well. Here's why I'm going to do this. And take the risk. What's the worst that can happen? You fail. I have learned more when I have failed at something than I have when I've done something and I don't know why I succeeded. It just worked. But I didn't kind of break it apart and figure out why it worked. So I think being really self-critical, self-thinking, and saying, okay, why did that work? Why did that fail? I think that's really good. But I do think that sometimes women hear the voices that are in their heads. If you have always been told that this is not a career for you, it's for someone else, or if you have been told, you're not good at something, you start believing those things, right? And so if you've been told that, you've got to go in there and do a reset on your brain to say, I can do it, and then go get the skills. And if you can't do something, go find someone who will help you do it. The most powerful person in the room is the person who knows how to ask a good question. Or say, I don't know, help me understand it. There's power there.
Definitely. Seeking the insight and being humble. I think it's oftentimes, and this is where some of the whole imposter misconceptions may come into play. We say, hey, you need to be confident and sure, but hey, you don't want to be, so it's like, okay,
yeah.
So how do I fit the right scenario in place to where, yes, I am confident and I should try. And I think it does come down to that whole curiosity element.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing too is that we're not going to be good at everything. No. It's just not going to happen. And what I get annoyed at is sometimes there are motivational speakers. There are some who are very good. There are some that get you all hyped up, but there's no substance there to actually give you the tools to get better. It's just, oh, have confidence. Well, yeah, great. But what are some of the things that I need to do to have that confidence? And I always say it's you take a piece of something. So I'll use this for example. If I'm training someone to go out and do speaking, you don't go speak in front of 500 people the first time. What you do is you go and you get up and speak at the PTA meeting or at a church gathering or at a book club or whatever. And you start small and you build those skills, and then you can go talk to 500 people. But it's little steps along the way. You don't just leapfrog over. It doesn't happen.
That's a great point. Okay, so how do you ensure that your business practices align with your core values and ethics?
Oh, that's an easy one. So in case you haven't figured it out, I'm a pretty straight shooter. I kind of call it the way I see it. For one thing, I think communication is really critical, because when you run a business, it's not just you. It's understanding what are your core values. For us, it's acting with integrity. It is always doing what is in the best interest of our customer and our team. It's doing work that we are proud to do. We don't take on jobs that we don't believe in it. It's always, the benchmark for, I mean, obviously being good at what you do. But then it's not just having those core values. It's talking about day in, day out as we're doing something. I'll give you an example of integrity. So we're going to fly somewhere to do a job for a customer of ours. And maybe in that same city, we're going to do a job for another customer. I know business owners that would charge both travel to both of those people, the same amount of travel, right? And you only have one travel expense, but they're double dipping. Okay. That is not acting with integrity. If we're traveling to a city, we will say to our customer, guess what? We're coming for somebody else. Can we split the travel costs between you two and make that easier for everybody? That's, to me, that's a simple example of integrity. Okay. It's when we do work, it's not taking somebody else's work and passing it off as our own, right? And in a creative business, that happens a lot. People steal ideas. You don't steal ideas, right? It's those simple things. And it's being able to, when you lock the door at night and you go out, you can feel good about what you did. For me, I mean, obviously you have to make money, right? I mean, you have to. I mean, we're not in this, but our ability to do that in a way that is ethical, in a way that we're doing good things for the people, I think that's really important. And I talk about it a lot. Why are we doing this? And then and as a team, we talk about those things. If you don't talk about it, people, your employees and the people that you work with will not get it. It doesn't happen by osmosis, right? So I will say, here's why we're doing this. Anybody have any questions? Talk about why. And it's infectious. I mean, people get it. And if they don't, then they shouldn't be working here. That's the other side of it, is when you find people who don't have the same ethics, the same values, they really should go work somewhere else, because they're not gonna mesh with the team here, I think.
Okay, so you need to help me a little bit, because when you start talking about, shooting straight and being a straight shooter,
yeah,
sometimes if we take that particular, and it's a skill, being that clarity component, if I take that too far, I become someone who just blows outward,
yes,
but never
yes.
receives and is never having interactions with I mean, how do you find that fine line between being the straight shooter and then enabling other people to feel comfort with being able to
Yeah.
kind of push back?
Well, I think a lot of that is in the how you say things. It's, you can deliver a message that may be difficult for someone to hear, but recognizing and saying, I know this may be hard for you. I know that you're trying, but maybe they're not measuring up. I'll use that as an example. It's the how you explain to people. It's having the empathy and giving them the opportunity also to talk. Being a straight shooter means that you listen. I spend a lot of time, I know I'm talking a lot now. I spend a lot of time listening. And I think maybe that's a skill that I think we've kind of lost a little bit. We've become this sort of self-centered me generation. We have one-sided conversations. When I talk about being a straight shooter, I talk about always being honest with people, but in a kind way. Okay, it's how you say something, and frankly, when you have those discussions and you approach people in that way, and they know you're doing it from a good place, they may not agree with you, but they also appreciate that you're giving them a perspective. And I am not always right. I mean, I will often say to my staff, I might be wrong here. I don't know. You tell me, what do you see? And then So but I know what you mean, because I think sometimes when we talk about being a straight shooter, it gets translated to being abrupt or rude or insensitive. And I think women often get accused of that, maybe more often than sometimes men do. But I don't think we have to. We still have to be who we are, and we have to present things in a way that people can listen. I think that there may have been a time in my life, when I was a lot younger, where I might not have taken that into consideration. And I might have maybe been, not in my mind, but in somebody else's mind, maybe too short with them. Um, I've really worked on that over the years, because I know not everybody is direct and not everyone is. But it's really interesting, because I have actually had employees say, I prefer this because other places where I've worked, I never knew where I stood. And you always tell it to me straight, so I know. And and I think that's a good way to be. For me, it might not work for others.
Well, there's two things to me that I keep hearing you hitting upon, and that is, clarity and the expectation setting.
Mm-hmm.
And even when we're starting to talk about really helping to manage ourselves, we still have to do those two things.
Absolutely.
Set some
Yeah.
expectations for ourselves, and then be able to look at things with clarity to say, am I delivering?
Yeah.
And be truthful and
Yeah.
honest. And then we have to take that and now start applying it to if we want to build and grow and scale a business. And even for what we're talking about here, I think that's also, and you hit on it too, I think you did, talking about doing work with the people who you want to do work with. And that's also too that expectation and setting. Because if not, it's like, hey, this ain't going to work. Even when you started talking about the partner, this is not going to work. We're just not a right fit. And you know what? That's okay.
And it is okay. One of the things that I think I always say, it's not personal. When you make some of these decisions, we've had people ask us to do jobs, and do things that we thought were, here, simple example. Let's just pull a famous song off the radio and use it in our video. No, you can't do that. Uh, that first of all, it's not ethical. It's not legal. And people do it all the time. We will not do that. And if I have a customer who consistently asks me to do things that I don't think are right, I send customers away, and that's hard. That is really hard. But yeah, I have a chapter actually in the book called "Know When It's Time to Leave." Right? Know when it's time for clients to go away. Send them away. It's okay to do that, and I think sometimes people feel like they don't have that power to do that. And truly, if you're working for someone else, you don't. I mean, that's why I take my responsibility really seriously. Because if I'm not setting the standard, the people here will not. But I think you're right. Having clarity and that's hard to do sometimes. Sometimes we're just not quite sure. There's this big gray area. Not everything is cut and dry.
That's true. Okay. I would also, if you could help me understand and maybe provide clarity around innovation, because well, when you look at innovation, and the people who actually are the scientists in innovation and creative thinking, basically, if you boil it down to those that are not the science people, it's taking two or multiple things and putting them together and creating something new. So now let's apply that conceptually to what you were talking about as we don't steal. Now, music licensing, we can get that. But when you start talking about other things like, frameworks and concepts and all that other stuff,
Yeah.
we have to be able to take those things and help it to infuse our thinking, so that we have hopefully a new way of thinking. That's creativity. It's taking this and this and creating something different and new. How do you draw the line between stealing and innovating?
Oh, That's a really hard question. Um, so, part of, people say, is there anything really new? And I think you kind of hit on that. What's new is not necessarily all the parts and pieces may be there. It's the way you put things together. Um, and I think some things are not that innovative. I got to be honest with you. People think they're doing something innovative, and it's really not that innovative. I think there comes a point at which, and I don't know if there's a formula for this, but if you're taking parts and pieces of something and you're combining them into something that is very different, and 20% of it is something that has, been created and you're just repurposing it, I guess it depends on how much of it is new in my mind. And sometimes, like if I'm writing, if I'm pulling concepts from other people, I'm crediting them for it, right? I mean, so in a writing sense, that's easy because you are giving credit to someone, but then building on it around other, adding your own spin to it. I think when it comes to products, that's when it can get a little iffy. And I wouldn't even begin to assume, but intellectual property, there are some hard and fast rules about that. I think in the creative world, it's a little different, and I think sometimes it's messy. I mean, it's really messy. You're composing a song, and you put a certain kind of sequence of keys in there, and maybe it was used in another. I mean, there's only so many sequences, right? So is that stealing? Probably not, but there have been lawsuits about that, that this little piece. So I think I don't know that I have a really good answer for you, Jim. I think it can be really messy. And you certainly don't want to use somebody else's work, but on the other hand, you're right. Where is that line? It's probably different in every situation.
I think it's one of and especially when, again, talking about the advances in artificial intelligence, I mean, and how
Yes.
artificial intelligence goes about, being able to present information back to people based on their queries. I mean, it's accessing stuff that's already there. So it's like, okay. And I think this is the struggle that a lot of people have. And so then they're talking about, well, generative AI. So let's get it to think,
Yes.
okay. So I think we're going to be,
You can go down a big rabbit hole there.
most definitely. And
Yeah.
So I think, though, as you were explaining it, I think the important thing to note is that you need to know where you need to draw the line and be comfortable with it.
I think so. Yeah. I think we're still learning a lot, especially with the new technologies. I mean, I will tell you, I don't use AI to write. I know a lot of people do. It comes out of my head, and in fact, I've actually had clients say, here, I asked AI to do this, and this is what it came back as, a script for recruiting engineers. And I look at it and I go, well, yeah, I mean, but it's not you. It's very generic. You could be recruiting for anybody. It doesn't feel like you. That's where I go, and I know people use it to get a start on stuff. I'm not saying that people shouldn't. I'm just saying I don't.
Sure.
For me, I start from scratch.
And this goes back from the knowledge piece. So what is happening with a lot of the capabilities that's out there, it does allow you to maybe submit writing samples. It does allow you
Sure.
to submit, background and bio information. It does allow you to put in your values and beliefs and all that stuff. And it's one of those things like, well, do you want the quick pill or or,
Yeah.
or do you want the thing that's actually going to make a difference for you in the long term? It's that
Yeah.
kind of decision in a lot of instances. So then it becomes, we all talk about the importance of quality. And like you said, it's not you. Well, he can make it to be, or she can make it to be them and sound like them and to have all
Mhm.
of that in there,
Sure.
but it just takes more work.
It does.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying, there are places where, and I believe in technology. I mean, obviously, I run a technology company. So in my book, I actually had to explain Chat GPT. And because there's a whole chapter about technology and how do you use technology and why is it important to business. And so I asked Chat GPT to explain itself, and I took it word for word and I said, so I asked Chat GPT, what is this all about? And then I pulled it out and put it into the book. And it did a really good job, actually. And there are entire books that are now being written using AI, right? Um, and maybe there's a place for it. I know we use AI in certain circumstances in my business, and there are tools of it that make things easier. If we're photoshopping a still, it can get you 80% of the way. You still have to go in and do a lot of tweaking, but it saved us time. So saves my customer money, right? But there are still things that you still have to do.
Oh yeah.
I'm not worried about it taking over my job.
You're right. You're right. I mean, and again, like you're kind of alluding to is that we have to know where to draw the line, set the expectation,
Absolutely.
find clarity, and say, okay, this is the augmentation element,
Yes.
and then here is the humanity element, and this is what the expectation is.
Yeah.
It seems simple, but when we're in the heat of the battle, as they say,
Not always. Not always.
definitely not.
Enjoying the show? After joining Marina's Army, subscribe and share the Cherish and Conquer podcast on your favorite platform. Thank you. Now, back to the show.
Okay, so now we're going to actually go through our breakthrough Blitz speed round. Sorry,
Oh, wow, that's scary.
are you ready to help us break through?
All right,
Cynthia?
throw them at me.
All right, here we go. So,
Here we go.
what's your favorite productivity tool or app?
Oh. When I'm traveling, Yelp, because I got to eat and I need to know what's around me there.
Absolutely. So, what's your favorite way to unwind after a busy day?
Ooh, visiting with a friend and having a glass of wine.
Very good. If you could have dinner with any female business leader, living or deceased, who would it be?
Ooh. Oh. Living or deceased? Eleanor Roosevelt.
Very good. What's your favorite quote or mantra that keeps you motivated?
It's actually a quote from my dad. And my dad always said, do what's in your heart. It's my favorite quote.
It's a good one. So, what is one piece of advice you'd give to an aspiring female entrepreneur?
Do your homework and read my book there. And I'll tell you why do your homework, because not everyone should own a business. Right? So do your homework.
Fair enough. And that book again is Small Business, Big Success by Cynthia Kay. Okay,
Yeah.
here's my last Breakthrough Blitz question.
Ooh.
What's the biggest misconception people have about being a female entrepreneur, and how do you address it in your own experience?
Oh. You ask really good questions. No, you really do.
Thank you.
What is give it to me again. What is the biggest misconception
That people have about being a female entrepreneur, and how do you address it in your own experience?
I think the biggest misconception that people have is that you have to be this strong big presence to be a female entrepreneur. And I don't think you need to be. I think sometimes the quieter I am, the more effective I am. And I've learned that over time. I don't need to go in and blow people away. I think being good at what you do and letting people, by your actions, see that. You don't have to try to impress people. I think you just have to be yourself, which is what I try to do. I mean, if you see me 2 months from now, you're going to get the same person, right? You can't keep up an act for very long. You just have to be who you are. So I think that it's a misconception that you have to go be something that you're not. You don't. You can do it your own way.
Cynthia Kay, incredible conversation. How do our podcast listeners get in touch with you?
Easiest way is, there's a couple of ways. Cynthia at thinkck.com. Or you can go to cynthiakaybiz.com and there's the website. They can reach me through that as well. Okay.
Cynthia Kay, thank you for sharing your knowledge and wisdom, and we wish you the very best.
Thank you. I appreciated the conversation and all the tough questions.
Thanks for tuning into the Cherish and Conquer podcast from Marina. Join our community of trailblazing women at community.marina.ai and get access to exclusive resources, checklists, and guides. If you found value in today's episode, please rate, review, subscribe, and share it across your social platforms. See you soon, and remember, barriers are for breaking.